Well, let's go back to London now, and joining us live is the host of Piers Morgan Uncensored. Piers Morgan, nice to talk to you this evening. Apologies for the circumstances. I think it's been said a few times today already that we all knew this day was coming, but now that it's arrived, it's still a complete shock.
You know, it's an unbelievable shock, not just to the system of individuals here in the UK, but I think to the psyche of the country. You know, I'm 57 years old and I've only ever had one monarch, this Queen. And she'd already been reigning for 13 years before I came along. And most people in Britain will tell a similar story. She's been the only monarch we've ever known. And of course, the British monarchy is kind of unique now around the world. And she represented to me all the very best values of being British. You know, a sense of duty, of resilience, of stoicism, of humility, of service, all these things which made Britain such a great country. She kept that torch burning throughout her reign. And with her passing, you know, I worry about where we're going to be going. Britain's already in a pretty parlous state right now with the financial crisis coming out of a pandemic, a war in Europe again, and now we get hit by this. And I think there's a collective seismic shock going on in this country tonight.
Do you fear that King Charles won't be able to hold that together the way that Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II did?
Well, I hope he can. I mean, it's a very difficult challenge, isn't it? He's following the greatest monarch of all time. She was the longest reigning, and in my opinion, the greatest, not just in Britain, but in the world. And I think that that's a huge, huge thing to have to follow. And of course, everything's moving very fast in the modern world. Can Charles adapt? He's not a young man himself. The advantage he has, he's been the longest apprentice in the history of royals, being there watching his mother do her thing. He's had this masterclass from the greatest monarch all that time. And it'll be interesting to see how he can now do that himself. I think he's a good man. I think he'll be a very good king, but it's a challenge. There's no question. This is a big moment for the country, and it's a big moment for the monarchy.
I was lucky enough to meet her years ago in London, and I know you have too, Piers. How do you reflect on her personally?
You know, she was an indomitable lady to meet, quite intimidating. You know, when she walked towards you, you were like, God, this is the Queen. You know, she's met 13 American presidents, 15 British prime ministers, 100 world leaders. She's met everybody, and I'm pretty low down the cab rank. So everyone that met her, I think, like I did, felt this sense of being intimidated, nervous. You stammered out your words, trying to make a fool of yourself. I remember a time at Windsor Castle. She had a big party for media people, and we were looking out on the gardens, and I said to her, Your Majesty, I said, do you actually like hosting these garden parties? And she looked at me and she said, well, Mr. Morgan, let me put it to you like this. How would you like 12,000 complete strangers trampling over your lawns? And then she howled with laughter. And I've got a great picture just after we both burst out laughing, which will be now a treasured possession. But she had a great witty sense of humour. She was incredibly intelligent, phenomenally well-read. But of course, ultimately, because she'd met all these world leaders and had all these state visits, she was able to tap into all these brains from around the world. And it made her, in my opinion, one of the wisest people of modern times. And she was able to show that wisdom in the way she reigned. She didn't take a political position about anything. She didn't make many addresses to the country outside of her annual Christmas speech. Only about 4 times did she address the nation. But I remember at the pandemic, at the height of it, when thousands of people were dying, the country was gripped with fear like many countries. People were in lockdown, separated from family and friends. And she went on television for under 5 minutes. And she made a speech that I think was her greatest moment. And she just reminded us about World War II and said, we went through this before, we came through it, you will see your friends again, we will meet again. And even as I'm reliving it now, I'm feeling a shiver down my spine about the impact it had on the country. It was such a national relief to hear her put it into perspective and say, we've been through worse and we've come through it. That was her great quality. able to celebrate with the country when we wanted it, able to commiserate and console us when we needed it. She was a unique monarch, a unique person, and it's a huge loss to the country.
How do people learn from that powerful form of soft diplomacy that she mastered?
Well, she wasn't ever judgmental in public. She didn't take sides. She would meet prime ministers from the left and right and treat them with equal respect. We didn't know what she thought about any political issues. She never said. She never gave interviews. You know, there's a lesson there, isn't there, for public figures who constantly try and justify themselves or explain themselves or complain. Some of the younger royals running rival royal families, trading off their titles. I'm not going to mention names, but you know what I'm talking about. In my view, chipping away at the mystique of the monarchy, constantly jabbering in public. The Queen was never like that. She didn't give interviews. We never really knew her personal thoughts. She knew that what was ultimately important for the country was that she was a figurehead, an unimpeachable figurehead who barely ever put a foot wrong in 70 years. Think about any other public figure in the world. They can't go 70 minutes normally without putting a foot wrong. She didn't put a foot wrong in 7 decades. And she just did her thing. And whether you believe in the monarchy or not, whether you have Republican feelings about the monarchy, it doesn't really matter. I think everyone respected her for what she was. She was never in it for personal gain, never in it for herself, only in it for what could be to the benefit of the country and the Commonwealth. And I've had a lot of friends in Australia in the last few hours sending me messages, really touching actually, just reaching out, messages of condolence, you know, to the country, to the UK. And I send it back to people in Australia that obviously she's been the figurehead there for a long time too. And I think we share a sense of loss today.
Do you feel like this might trigger, a bit more of a breakaway, a bit more of a Republican movement now that she's passed?
It might. I mean, I hope not. I think that what the monarchy does, I've always felt the argument about the money side of it. I think they pay for themselves through tourism, so they don't really cost us anything. And what they show us, as we're seeing from the global reaction to the Queen's death, is that they represent stability in very difficult, turbulent times. And I like that stability personally. I don't think the royals are unimpeachable people. We see that from Prince Andrew to Meghan Markle and others. They can, let themselves down, let the monarchy down. But the institution itself, I think, still represents a powerful thing in a world that doesn't have many monarchies left. We have this special thing which connects us, connects countries in the Commonwealth. And, go to America and see what they feel about it. Go to Canada, go to large parts of Australia. And I know not everyone, but a lot of Australians love the monarchy, and I do. And I hope they survive and thrive. They've been through tough times. Charles has a big challenge, but I've got every confidence he'll be a good king.
Piers, Prince Philip only died last year. It was 17 months ago, April 9th last year, so not that long ago. Do you think there was an element of that contributed to the decline in her health, of heartbreak?
No question. I don't think she ever really got over it. They were married for over 70 years. He was her rock. He was this gigantic figure of support for her. He abandoned his own very successful naval career to be by her side. And I think they were a magnificent couple. And she never really recovered. I mean, that haunting image of her, I felt, when she was left in the church on her own at his funeral because of lockdown rules. And then to find out the British government who set the rules were all partying that night before was so disgusting. But she was there on her own, in her mask, with none of her family there, mourning the loss of this man on her own. And I don't think she ever really recovered. I think she had a broken heart, and then her body basically began to give up. And I think that she's now reunited with him. I believe that. And I think that's one of the small good things about today, is she's back with her rock. And the other good thing, I think, is that in the summer, we got a chance to thank her. The Platinum Jubilee was a phenomenal success. And the crowds you see tonight at Buckingham Palace, very somber, very respectful, very quiet, paying respects. Well, the same crowds in the summer were cheering her from the rooftops. And I was there, and it was spine-tingling when she came out. And I think that was great. We got a chance as a country to say thank you to Her Majesty. And I'm glad she got to live long enough to see that.
The family is mourning at Balmoral this evening, Piers. Some question marks over whether Harry was actually able to get there in time before she passed. But do you think with all that's said and done, and whatever people's views of Harry and Meghan are, and Harry's relationship with William and Charles, will this be a healing moment for them in a way?
Well, I hope so, because you've now got King Charles III and both his sons are at war. And Harry's been at war with his father for reasons which completely baffle Charles. I was told earlier this week Charles is heartbroken by what's been going on with his son, and he doesn't understand it. And I'm afraid, I've said this before and I'll say it again, Meghan Markle has a lot to answer for. You know, while the royal family's had to suffer Prince Philip being seriously ill then dying, and now the same with the Queen, she's been going out of her way over in America to constantly throw brickbats about the royals, constantly try and attack them, portray them as a bunch of callous racists, which they're not. And I think it's been very damaging and upsetting to all the royal family. So I hope she just sticks a cork in it, stays in California and goes about her life without trashing the monarchy and the royal family, without whom she wouldn't have the titles that she exploits for vast amounts of money. So I hope that she sees common sense. I hope Harry sees common sense and builds bridges with the family that he's been slowly disowning, because it's been incredibly upsetting, I think, for people in Britain to see this split in the royal family. Diana, who I knew pretty well, his mother, I think, would have been appalled by what's been going on, and particularly the rift between William and Harry. So, you know, these kind of moments, they can go one of two ways. They can make things a lot worse because emotions run so high, or they can bring warring families together. And I hope it's the latter.
And just a final note here, Piers, before we go. We'll leave on an upward note here. How should she be remembered by people, not just in the Commonwealth, but around the world?
I think she's the greatest public figure of the last 100 years, and possibly a lot longer than that. She was the longest reigning monarch in the world. There was a French king who began when he was 4. I don't really count that. If you take that out of the equation, she was the longest reigning monarch ever, never put a foot wrong, was this extraordinary woman who provided so much solace and comfort to this country, and I think so much inspiration to the world. That is why the world is now mourning her and celebrating this life in the way that they are. I mean, the amount of world leaders racing out to pay the most fulsome tributes is quite extraordinary, and I think says it all. She was a one-off, a unique woman who, remember, was 26 when she took over this throne, and yet from that moment on, she gave her life and dedicated it to duty and service to the country and the Commonwealth. And, you know, God bless her, and long live the King.
God save the King. I mean, that's something you're going to get used to saying. You're going to have to get used to saying, Piers.
And on stamps are going to change, and, you know, currency will change, notes, banknotes, everything will change. You know, pictures in public places will change now from the Queen to Charles. That is the way the succession works. That is the way the monarchy works. The Queen was a great believer, and she would say, look, by all means, mourn me for a bit, but then get a grip, dust yourselves down, move on, and remember, the country comes first.
Well said, Piers Morgan. Really appreciate a lengthy chat with you this morning. Great to have you with us on what is truly a sad day, not just in the United Kingdom, throughout the Commonwealth, but the world. Piers Morgan, host of Piers Morgan Uncensored here on Sky. Thanks for your time.